Who do we have today with us on the stage? Trent McConaghy, founder of the Ocean Protocol, and Marta Piekarska-Geater, senior geostrategist at ConsenSys. I am sorry for the pronunciation of the names. I'm not a native, but I am, and we are so excited to have you with us today. Before we dive in the topic and learn from you guys, talk and do the Q&A sessions, I will pass the mic to Mario to get to know you more.
Cool. Thanks, Era, for the nice intro. As this is kind of a special setup now, for everyone who is joining as a guest, please mute yourself so we don't. The conversation will not be interrupted by that. If you have questions, please put them in the chat section so we can follow up on that at the end. And yes, that's basically it. We are very excited to have you guys on, Trent and Marta. And as you got to know very shortly before we started, we always start with a little bit of a fun fact about ourselves that can be personal, business related, crazy, boring. It doesn't matter. So as Era and I do this all the time, we need to really scramble for facts. So mine for this time will be a fun fact. On Friday, I have my first laser gig. I have a laser and I'm making visuals to at a party. So, fun fact.
That's really cool.
Thanks.
How about you, Marta?
Oh gosh, well, the fun fact that not so fun for me, but was something that seems like you found amusing was that I happen to live in Cambridge, but I was in London this morning. And I had to catch a train back home. So I took off on a city bike to cycle over to the train station. And as I was leaving, it was sunny. As I arrived to the train station, it was sunny. But for the middle 15 minutes, it was hailing. So my hair is completely wet. I managed to somehow dry off, but still, like, my socks are wet and I'm pretty bloody cold. So there you go. Sunny weather in London.
Well, that means
make it
through. Trent, how about you?
Good. Fun fact. Riffing on that sort of DJing, playing things, I did once DJ at a friend's wedding about 10 years ago, and it was an unmitigated disaster. People don't like AC/DC being played at weddings, I guess.
Oh, great. If you ever have a gig again, you have a visual laser guy now to, to connect to.
There's a pretty big community in crypto space, I think, that does DJing and others.
Yes, that's very much. Sure. Era, you're not getting around your fun fact.
Yeah, I was trying to pass it. All right, so my fun fact would be done, guys. I never liked cola, Coca-Cola, whatsoever soda things. I do drink as a comfort drink, normal, like water, bubbly water with lemon. And that is my, to-go drink, and never drink Cokes and stuff. I'm not sure if it's a fun fact. I'm not that fun enough, I guess. But anyway, it's not about this.
It's all good. Thanks for sharing, everyone. So now that being said, I think we can jump in and say, look, this is a second part of our DAO series, and as those of you know who joined the last one with Tyler, who's also here, is we covered the ground a little bit on what are DAOs and what is kind of the setup, and so we're basically now want to dive in a bit deeper and see, how some examples and how does it, relate into actual use cases. And that's what we're about to talk about. And yes, then in the end, please, if you have any questions, again, put them in the comment section and we will come back to that at the end. This episode will last about, until 7 hour time, right? It's like now 40 minutes more or less. And let's dive in. Era.
Let's dive in, right? So we talk about DAOs a lot lately, right? We, as Maria mentioned, even have this whole Crowdcast episodes about DAOs. But I want to ask, first of all, what are good reasons to start a DAO from your perspective? And we can maybe start with Trent.
So I think I need to preface this with a working definition, because otherwise it's controversial. I come from the world of AI, and everyone in the dog had a different definition of AI, and that's a good thing. Everyone in the dog has a different definition of blockchain. That's a good thing. So it's okay to have, and same thing with NFTs. So it's okay to have a lot of different definitions, and really it's sort of like, what's the pragmatic, is this definition useful in some way, right? So, I come from a world, in rural Canada where there's co-ops everywhere. Yet at the same time, there are companies, there are soccer clubs, there are, small companies, large companies, there's cities with mayors, there's provincial governments, there's national governments, and so on. So there's all different forms of organizations. What I see that, pragmatically speaking, one definition of a DAO is simply it's new governance technology, so that, you don't have to rely just on pen and paper and non-verifiable web technologies, but you can also have sort of blockchain technology to help to coordinate humans. And so it can be, and you can take that technology and use it to implement the structure of a co-op or of a small company, an LLC, or a large company, or a soccer club, or a city, or a nation, or otherwise. So it's to me, it's really best thought of as a tool. That said, that's a useful definition. And there's, other definitions, such as a nice simple one is it's a subreddit with a wallet. That's useful, but it also points to a particular form of organization. So then going back to your question, could you repeat your question again? Because I want to make sure I answer it succinctly now.
Definitely. What are the good reasons to start a DAO?
Yeah. Well, if you want to have a community that is online, that manages resources, that's where it's, using blockchain technology has a promise to keep the friction low, right? Or simply because, it's a way to engage everyone, because people, love to have DAOs and blockchain and all that too. So, but at the end of the day, you still need to have a good mission and understand what you're going for. If you just hang out and say, we've got a DAO, that's not going to last. It'll last maybe 1 month, 6 months, but people will lose interest and fade away. So ultimately, you need something that's with a sustainable, set of goals.
Mm-hmm. And Marta?
So I will answer first with a stat, because it's always, you seem like a cool person when you have some stats on hand. There are, according to Deep DAO, there are over 4.3 thousand DAOs out there. And that's a low number, most likely. Now, guess how many of them have at least 1,000 active users?
Active in the sense of monthly active, yearly active, daily active?
Regularly participating. Okay.
Not so many.
I'll tell you that it's a very low number. 100. It's 28. What?
Oh, God.
Yeah. So, and that, I think that highlights what are the good reasons to have a DAO. It's to embrace that community and to build something that is sustainable for a very long time. However, just as Trent said, you have to have a project, you have to have a mission, you need to know what you're organizing people around. If you have those things and you're comfortable with having zero control over it, because that's also a very important part, then DAO may make sense for you. I think that it's actually interesting to answer this question from that perspective, because most of the time I have to tell people why DAOs don't make sense for them. Because everybody, it's like, we had our ICO boom, we had our token boom, we have an NFT boom, we have a DAO boom. It's all kind of those phases. And a lot of the time explaining to people why DAOs are really hard to organize is much trickier than telling them, oh yeah, let's do a DAO. But I think the best way to answer that question, why DAO, is actually a very good book called the spider and the starfish, or the starfish and the spider, which makes an argument for decentralization. And basically what it talks about is the analogy is that if you cut off spider's legs, it will die. It can't move. But if you cut off a leg or two legs, or even all of starfish, it's only necessary to have a single leg, and the starfish will grow back to its natural form. Mm-hmm. And that's why DAOs matter, and that's why DAOs are important. And when do you want to have a DAO? If you want to have that longevity, if you want to have a guarantee that your project will survive, as long as it's a worthy project and there are enough people who want to participate in it, of course.
Yeah, it's actually very interesting, this analogy, because if you see the DAO as a starfish, if you cut off the legs, maybe not a starfish will grow back, but something else, right? It's to me, it's like the ultimate ongoing pivot, right? It's like usually you have like, okay, we decide now we do this, we pivot because of whatever, but the DAO seems like it's like it's a working pivot in a sense.
Yeah.
I would want to ask, actually, let's say I decided to start a DAO and I want to build it. What is the first ever step that I need to take? It has been to take it.
Well, probably you'll first have to go to something like a DAO house or other launch pads for DAOs and click a few clicks and you'll launch your DAO. It's actually really easy to set up a DAO if you use those. But then the hard work starts, of course.
I would say actually write down your mission and values. That's the very first thing. And then find like-minded people that want to join you on your journey. And then with them, discuss, what it is that, iterate on the mission and values. And then, it's a question of implementation, right? But I think it's really important to get those other things done first. Because if you're not sort of aligned with that initial seed of people, 3 people, 10 people, whatever, then it's going to be really hard to proceed. It's sort of like, imagine founding a company where you've got 5 founders that each have a different direction and a different idea, right? It's much better if you get aligned up front before you start the company, before you distribute shares, etc. Same thing with a DAO.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Of course, my kind of answer was a bit joking here. I think that one thing that I realized over time working with various DAOs is that actually it's an evolution of how we organize humans rather than a revolution. And the same basic principles for starting a company and starting a DAO apply. And you need to have the same basis covered. So sure, you have a startup, you can start it with free friends in the basement or in your garage and it will work. But if you want to start looking for funding, you'll need to start thinking about, your long-term financial perspective, your marketing strategy, your growth strategy, your partnerships. And you'll need to find people, DAO or not, who will cover those. And possibly, with DAOs, there is a power of scale and size. So if you have the right size of the community, you will be able to have working groups or rather a single person that runs it. But you will need to make sure kind of constantly reevaluate or the DAO should reevaluate itself, right? Because you can't be the leader of a DAO. You can be the spark that creates it. DAO itself is kind of equal for everyone. But it has to cover all of those bases. And of course, DAOs are nothing without a community. Like that's you have to have a strategy for how do you build your community, how can you attract new people, and how do you deal with that, that conversion of people joining versus people actually participating, which is, I think, one of the biggest challenges of DAOs today.
Mm-hmm. We can maybe say having the technical part is another thing, but making people still constantly curious and then trying to keep them on the DAOs, it actually needs a lot of work on the background as well. I mean, we talked a little bit, you guys mentioned about that, but just to have it also in the nutshell, would you maybe say it or name a few things, what kind of resources, people's on the background with the companies, or the skills requires for a DAO is the crucial ones, if it could be named?
Why don't you go ahead this time, Marta?
Okay, sure. So I think what is needed to be successful, definitely having a manifesto or a mission, something that gets people together and they know what they're working on. Something that a lot of DAOs fail at, and I think why that engagement rate or that conversion rate from participants to contributors is not great, is that DAOs don't think too often about making clear what are the opportunities for engagement. So it's a bit like, when you start working with your friends. I'm part of a rowing. So fun fact about me, I'm a rower. I row a lot lately. And I joined a rowing club about a year ago. And the thing that drives me absolutely mad is that I have no idea what are the rules, what is needed. Like, I wanted to engage more with the club, and everybody were like, well, yeah, of course, well, blades need like painting, you could do that. But they wouldn't tell me that until I was like asking and asking and asking. And that's the problem with any kind of organization which has a strong core community. We all assume that everybody will know what to do, and newcomers don't. So having the contribution opportunities, the layout of what is needed, and being able to facilitate that, so that if someone shows up with the skills, they know what to pick up, is really, really important. Another thing that is quite important is figuring out your governance model, understanding, how can people progress in their participation and become more influential or less influential. A lot of it will have to do with a community building. So things like, what is the stickiness of your product? What is the exciting thing that will people see you, but also want to stay around? Is it the fact that the community is awesome and like you have non-stop games on Discord? Or maybe it's the fact that you learn a lot by being with that project. Or maybe it's because, you want to be friends with Vitalik. So this is your way to become friends with Vitalik or Trent or any other rock star out there, right? So those kind of things are quite important to grow your DAO.
Interesting.
Yeah, I can sort of contribute a couple of points here. So I think it really depends on the shape of the DAO. Like I mentioned, you can have everything from a soccer club to running a nation, and you could call it a DAO, right? Leveraging blockchain technology to help to coordinate humans. One way to kind of group it into three groups is you've got protocol DAOs, you've got Dunbar DAOs, and you've got the in-between, which is, call them hierarchical DAOs. So protocol DAOs, a lot of people argue that Bitcoin is a DAO because it is coordinating a bunch of humans. There's dozens, hundreds of miners that have each, many of them have put in millions of dollars in order to, build mining equipment, et cetera, in order to earn money, right? So in that case, most of the coordination is automated, right? Bitcoin manages to minimize governance, and make no mistake, governance is an attack vector. The goal should be minimizing, not maximizing governance. The more squishy humans you have, the more chance you have of attacks and getting taken down. Bitcoin does have governance in the form of hard forks, right? People don't like what they see, they fork away, BSV, Bitcoin Cash, all this. So that's one, is protocol DAOs. They can go to 10,000, 100,000 plus, and the community is sort of these concentric circles, miners, users, etc. On the opposite end are Dunbar DAOs, which is basically 50 people or less, maybe 150 people max, that really can kind of know each other and iterate. And you can get away with a relatively flat hierarchy there. Although, in the end, there's going to be, 5, 10, 50 people max that emerge that are really doing the work, right? And it typically follows a parallel distribution. Like it's, there's 5 people that are doing 80% of the work, or 20% of the people do 80% of the work, however it is. And then in between, what if you, get to a Dunbar-sized DAO, you've got 50 people, 150 people, but then you keep growing. What do you do then, right? And the classical approach for companies, and we're starting to see this with DAOs, is hierarchy, right? Where each subgroup focuses on a well-defined set of goals and offers up an interface to others such that you don't have to have n-squared connections, right? 1,000 people don't need to talk to 1,000 people with 1,000,000 possible connections. It's just like, 10 people talking to 10 other group in their group, and that group talks to 10 other groups, et cetera. And this is how the thing scales. So I think overall, with all of these three things, when you're trying to coordinate, at the heart of it, what is your objective function or set of objectives and constraints, right? What are you trying to optimize for? Bitcoin, it's very simple. It's got a single objective function, maximize the security of the network as defined by the hash rate, right? With Dunbar DAOs that are 50 people, 150 people, they can just play. That's maybe it. Or maybe they're really trying to go for something that they coalesce over time. And this is when people talk about DAOs these days, they really usually mean that smaller thing. And then the hierarchical ones, we're seeing these tend to emerge of protocol DAOs that realize, they have to be a bit squishier and a bit more subjective than something like Bitcoin, right? So we're doing that, and there's a lot of DeFi DAOs out there that have, hierarchy, working groups, all of that. So with all of that, the main thing is you'll lose your way if you don't know your mission and values and then translate that to objective functions and well-defined roles for stakeholders. If you have that, then, you can survive, potentially the ages, right? We've seen many organizations that last for 100 years, 500 years more, right? Not many that last for 500, but many for 10 or 100. So I'll stop there. Once again, the summary is there's protocol DAOs at one end, Dunbar DAOs at the other end, and in between hierarchical DAOs. All of them need humans to coordinate. All of the humans need goals, and they all need to manage complexity in their own way.
I'm learning so many things. Oh my God, thank you. I mean, thank you for me and for the community, of course, but I'll stop there. I'm just learning so many things. I know everything.
All right. Thanks for this general view on, what's out there, how to organize, and different types of DAOs. As we, go more also into Ocean and ConsenSys, would be very interesting to hear where are you guys coming from? I know Ocean Protocol was always pursuing full decentralization from the beginning, and for ConsenSys, I actually don't know if this was something that came in later or from the beginning. So it would be great to hear about your beginning status quo and what's next, what's coming. Where are you in the process, and how's it going? Maybe Marta, you want to start?
You go first now.
Okay, sure. So I think overall it's really important to understand decentralization is a journey. If you go fully decentralized at the beginning, you might succeed, but there's a good chance you'll have crystallized the rules prematurely, and then it's really, really hard to adapt. And we've seen DAOs fall flat on their face and protocols fall flat on their face because they can't adapt, right? So it's better to have, a smaller team to start with that can iterate rapidly, listen to the community, get to product market fit with the product, and then crystallize over time. And over time is typically on the order of, half a year if you're lucky, but probably more like 5 years, right? And a lot of the really high quality teams that I engage with, they're all having timeline expectations of 3 years, 5 years to really fully, truly do it, right? And with Ocean, it's roughly that time frame too, right? We started out as a small team of people, and knowing that decentralization is a journey, bit by bit, we've been decentralized. And by decentralization, what this means is, my favorite definition of decentralized is no single point of failure. That's at the level of every level of the technology stack, as well as the humans and the squishy humans involved too, right? So you don't want to have centralized database that everyone's relying on all the way up and down the stack and the people. So okay. So with Ocean, we started in earnest in 2017, shipped the first product in 2018, and have been iterating. We're in the process of releasing our V4, our testnet's out on that. Initially, it was just the core team releasing, iterating with early customers and users. But along the way, we always saw that we wanted to decentralize the whole thing to sort of melt the core team into the community, right? And we saw that the path to do that was with a DAO. So in December, about 15 months ago, December of 2020, we launched Ocean DAO. And knowing that the difficulty of mission values, etc., and hard coordination, we said with Ocean DAO, we're going to do exactly one thing. It's going to simply be a grants DAO. That's it. It's going to be run by a small centralized-ish team. And it's going to have community for voting, basically allocating, curating the grants, proposals, etc., subject to a budget. We started there. And initially it was just 5 teams got 5,000 Ocean each. That was the total budget of 25,000 Ocean, about 25K worth of Ocean. US dollars worth. So that's where we started. And we just launched, and we didn't even write any software for this. We stitched together with like a wiki and a snapshot and a few other things, right? And then, but it was an immediate opportunity to engage more deeply with the community and to work with them to grow the DAO over time. So we've been growing it for the last 15 months on the amount of budget, the number of teams engaged. So we have monthly funding rounds. And the one that's just wrapping up right now had on the order of 35 teams that applied for funding. There's about enough funding available for, say, 20, 25 of them. So it's, basically there is competition to get funding for that. But these teams, they show up for, weekly town halls. There's a very active Discord, etc. And so this is still the backbone, but we also had a well-defined objective function. When you're applying for money, initially we went for a very stark, very harsh objective function, which is show us your ROI numbers, your expected ROI. But that was a bit too stark. So we needed to soften it to basically have people describe in a bit more text, is your project viable? How do you think it'll help Ocean? But it doesn't have to be ROI numbers. So it keeps growing and doing well that way. But now a lot of the roadmap for this year, by the time it's all done, it's another year and a half, is broadening the scope of what Ocean DAO does. So rather than just being a grants DAO, it's been growing, by the way, to having working groups now. It's got about 5 working groups. So, getting scale that way too. But it's going to grow to have its own treasury with treasury management rather than relying on the treasury of Ocean Protocol Foundation. And to have, rather than just a simple batch grants, it will have rolling grants. And it also will include other things like having voting to spend treasury resources in other ways, such as a liquidity mining program, etc. So overall, to summarize, decentralization is a journey. Ocean has been following this path, initially with a core team of, just on half centralized tech. The tech is all basically decentralized now. The core tech team is much more decentralized too. We're scattered throughout the world. And now we're in the process of, on the community side for the last year and a half, with the initial goal of simply the grants, knowing that builds an ecosystem, and there's been a wonderful ecosystem emerge around that, 200 plus teams getting funding, and generalizing that to broader scope. And the heart of that is really a DAO that controls treasury that can then allocate funding to teams, but also for other projects. So I'll stop there.
Great. Thanks for the deep insight of your journey, and thanks for also pointing out that this is a journey and a long project. You have this one area where you kind of test, and there's like a good engagement or community you can grow and then widen it, or start from the beginning and see how it goes. Yeah. When everything is still not clear in the beginning, maybe it's with. In this case, I guess, like with any other regular startup, centralized kind of startup, in the beginning, you don't really know how it goes. You need to find out some things before. So yeah, I'm happy to hear that Ocean DAO is going well, and projects are getting funded. Let's maybe Marta for your side on the ConsenSys side. I've also seen you guys are engaging a lot and writing also about tokenomics and DAO design and everything. So what has been your journey? What approach did you guys take?
So I'll start with I joined ConsenSys not even 2 months ago. So my version of the story might be slightly different to the official version because I'm still learning. But basically, ConsenSys, everybody knows, founded by Joe Lubin, one of the co-founders of Ethereum, with the initial aim for kind of building tech around Ethereum and making Ethereum a thing, making Ethereum happen, right? Mm-hmm. So it was really focused on getting startups or projects spin-off and making Ethereum accessible. And I really do think one of the reasons why I wanted to be part of ConsenSys was because I really think that if it wasn't for the work around the tooling and the education that ConsenSys did, Ethereum would have much harder time kind of breaking through. It was really, really supported by ConsenSys in some ways. And then in 2020, roughly 2019, 2020, ConsenSys went through a period of restructuring where all of those separate companies that were part of the portfolio all got kind of separated and then condensed under the ConsenSys Software Inc., which is the umbrella that hosts, I think, 5 different companies right now. MetaMask, Infura, ConsenSys Diligence, Codify, and I forget the 5th one because I'm new. But basically that's how it works. So my team, the one that I'm working with, is the Codify team, which is specifically focused on really Web3 engagement and figuring out how can we build tools for Web3, as well as be more present in Web3. Because one thing that happened over time is that while ConsenSys was building all of those tools and it was all great, we are not as present in the Ethereum and Web3 space as we would want to be. We are kind of seen more as a big software company that contributes to it, but we don't have the presence, basically. So the Codify team is almost like an R&D kind of go crazy research, do the tokenomics stuff and so on. And that's all the research that you've seen came from that team. And we've been helping DAOs structure their token research and token launches and so on. We are working on more of those kind of things, as well as I came on to take on the DAO strategy, both internally and externally. So this is a very new concept to ConsenSys of, first, how do we leverage the idea of DAOs internally? Where can projects actually launch internal DAOs, hopefully then open to public, but first internal DAOs, to experiment with how can we make them grow faster, how can we make them better, and so on. And of course, most of the projects, as we introduce them, you'll see that they will start with the grants programs. Like this will be the first thing that the DAOs will do. So you'll have the project running, being managed by the ConsenSys team, but the grants program would be, for each of those projects will be used for experimenting and engaging more people. Now, the other part of it is how do we get 500 employees of ConsenSys being more active and present in Web3? So how do we engage with other DAOs? How do we build partner programs? And that's something that my colleague is working on. Matt is brilliant at collaborating with different DAOs and setting up kind of pathways for contributions for the ConsenSys employees. I'm also working, we've published and I've worked on a voting policy. So part of the beauty of ConsenSys is that we have a lot of governance tokens from different projects, and these were sitting untouched. So we introduced last month a policy for how the governance decisions should be made, and we started participating in Uniswap votes, which I was like extremely excited about. So we have done 2 or 3 votes for now, and we are looking at how can we grow that kind of practice as well, in addition to looking at portfolio tokens and so on. So it's a process. It's I'm surprised how fast it's moving, because there's a lot of support from like all of the executive team to push it forward. There are some really exciting policies that I'm working on with my colleagues around engagement of ConsenSys. I mean, Joe has already said that MetaMask, some form of MetaMask DAO is coming as well. So we actually were more surprised by than most of the public probably about it. But we are definitely looking at how do we leverage those concepts. And it's an ongoing, in our case, it's an ongoing collaboration, but it's a difficulty between the legal team, the hiring and people and talent team, and
of course, can imagine.
who want to really push for it, right? Because it's unknown ground.
Yeah, thanks for these insights. I just with a look on the watch, I have to say time is flying, and I do want, in our special little format here, right, in our Google Hangouts, since we have everyone here. If anyone, I would like to open the floor for a question. If somebody wants to pose a question to Trent or Marta. We have loads of more questions. That's not the issue. But if somebody wants to chip in and ask a question, I think please, I'd say first come, first serve. And we have a couple of more minutes to do so. Yes, here, there.
Okay. Is there an alternative to a DAO that may be better functioning? Just a regular business.
Yeah, it depends what your goals are, right? If you don't care about having decentralized control, then just start an LLC or start a soccer club or start a co-op, right? And in fact, a lot of the philosophy of DAOs is very, very similar to co-ops, right? So in many cases, you probably should or would be better off just doing a co-op, right? But it kind of depends, if you're wanting to do something globally, then leveraging blockchain technology to coordinate humans around the globe is probably going to be helpful, right? But that said, there's other questions, things like, do you want to have a legal status? And if so, where, right? So that's why, for example, I'm also a member of Metacartel Ventures, which is a VC DAO, one of the first in the world. And it's actually a Delaware LLC, so that it has legal status, so that it can invest in particular companies, et cetera, right? And it's a very cool LLC. Its articles of incorporation are super short. And they say that the main rules of our company are at this smart contract here on Ethereum mainnet. And I point to that, and that's it, right? And there's some guidelines of how to interpret that and stuff. But so, going back to the question, is there an alternative to DAO that might be better functioning? It really depends on what your goals are. But make no mistake, once you're doing a DAO, there's a huge amount of coordination effort too. So there's various trade-offs.
100% agree. I wouldn't add anything to what Trent said.
Great. Thanks for the question. Thanks for the answer. Sorry, Era?
Tyler is raising his hand. I think he has a question.
Yes. I wasn't sure if it was me or who you said, but I'm just going to take the floor. What's your guys' take on the recently I've been seeing almost like a new taxonomy for DAOs where people are, DAC or a smart company or something like that. Do you feel like DAO is more of the ideology now at this point and people are making, iterations on it? Or how do you see if there's from a technical side actually true differentiating factors? Just curious.
I would say it goes to the definition that I had at the beginning of this call. I think the most useful definition is really that it's a tool, it's governance technology, but you can instantiate, any previous form of governance, whether it's how a co-op is run or a soccer club or a trust or a union or a city, et cetera, right? You can leverage blockchain technology to manage any of those. Most of the sort of rhetoric and mindset these days in blockchain land is around a very particular type of DAO, typically Dunbar DAOs with 50 to 150 people. But I see that as, that's always going to be there, but a lot of them will fall flat unless they have themselves well defined. But that's only a piece of the overall pie, the overall set of possible DAOs, right? I see that ultimately, as DAO technology gets better, DAOs will eat all the traditional governance structures, right? Every city will become a city DAO, and you won't even call it a DAO. It'll just be, Berlin. But it'll have blockchain under the hood that to help run it, right? So, where does DAO end and city begin, right? It's already democratically governed, et cetera. So it's useful to understand the various definitions, and ultimately, the question to ask is, how can this tool help me to accomplish my goals?
Yeah, I agree. I think that, we are in the phase as we are growing and experimenting. If we met here a year ago, it would be just we're talking about this concept that nobody really knows about, and there are 5 DAOs out there. It's crazy what happened over the course of the last 12 to 18 months. So I think all of those ideas of smart companies, something, all of that is effectively just trying to find legal frameworks to define that, because there are a lot of challenges from a legal perspective. I was talking to lawyers the other day, and they were saying, 90% of the time, DAOs that we talk to end up incorporating, and it's a matter of where do you want to incorporate and how. And there's this underlying structure where it's a foundation or a co-op, or depending on where you want to do it. Because you literally can't sign a single contract. Sure, Trail of Bits will sign a contract with DAOs. Any other audit company, they're like, well, where's your legal entity? How will you pay me? How will I chase you for paying me? Right? So it is tricky from that perspective.
I really appreciate you guys' take and the transparency as well, right? The progressive decentralization roadmap, right, that you talked about, Trent. That's where all the best, DAOs that I'm interacting with, they're starting as legal entities, like you were saying, Marta, and then progressively decentralizing over time as their, business grows and it allows for it, So it's makes me happy to see I'm on the right page with two experts like you guys. Saying that that's how it's going in the real world. So I appreciate it.
Yeah. Although I would give a couple comments. Digital world is part of the real world, right? There's no such thing. There's meat space and there's digital space. It's not like you wave a magic wand and everything that we're talking electronically is not the real world. So I push back on that. I know it's a particular choice of language, but it matters because it also relates to the idea of wet contracts and and dry contracts. This is a Nick Szabo concept. He wrote a wonderful blog post about it many years ago. So wet contracts are the legal contracts that we write down on dead trees and sign with ink and have police and military to enforce those laws. Right. Dry contracts are crisp computer code that automatically enforce the rules simply by virtue of being computer code. And generally, typically, they're radically more efficient, right? So yeah. I see in the future, fast forward 20 years, 50 years, maybe 99% of the world can be running on dry code, dry contracts, and we've got away from the wet contracts. So I see that the existing legal structures, the existing wet code is a bridge. Just like I remember having a conversation with Joe a few years ago, he saw the enterprise chains as a bridge to full public networks, right? And they're still a bridge. It's going to be like that for years, right? Same thing with wet code. Wet code is a bridge. That's it.
Fantastic. And my definition of the real world, though, just FYI, was you guys working in blockchain versus me theorizing on the other end. But no, I definitely agree with what you guys are saying, and I appreciate all the insights.
I had an eye, 2 o'clock, time flies, as Mario said, but before we come to closing, Trent McConaghy, is your question answered already, or is there anything you would want to ask?
Yeah, no, I had a few things to ask about inclusivity and how this will be interoperable with different blockchains, or how do you see all I heard is something about Ethereum, but I was just curious if you see in the future anything going towards any different other kind of blockchains, or even forming a different blockchain. I mean, like, even if you've seen how New York and Miami did their token with trying to get people to buy into the token, and then that Miami is probably the more solid framework than New York, because of the adoption level of people even understanding about this whole technology.
Okay, so your kind of the question is kind of I'm not into the topic. I don't know about New York and Miami kind of ecosystem, what's happening, but are they building kind of only a token, or is it like a DAO kind of related, or maybe Trent or Marta, do you guys know, or?
Well, I would say I would answer the greater question of is it only Ethereum, and the answer is absolutely not. It doesn't have to be Ethereum. I'm sure we know quite a lot of examples that are not Ethereum based. It's DAO, as Trent said, it's a way of organizing people around a project, and it has nothing to do with any underlying blockchain technology, basically. That's like the shortest, given the time, that's the shortest answer I could get.
Cool. Maybe to close it off. I know you guys have to leave. So just for the audience, to draw from your experience, if the audience only takes away one thing from this Crowdcast in relation to DAOs, what is it?
I can start. In 50 years, if not 20, the world will run on blockchain rails. DAOs will be a key piece of this. Blockchain infrastructure will be a key piece of this. Token engineering and incentives will be a key piece. But the world is going to be running on blockchain rails with dry code and all this. And overall, it will, improve coordination, reduce friction, make the world a better place, right? And of course, there's pros and cons, but I like to always, skate to where the puck is going, to quote the greatest athlete of all time. I'm Canadian. And the puck is going to a world running on blockchain rails.
Okay, thanks, Trent. Marta, what's your take?
Yeah, and in that same vein, I would say it's inevitable that you will at some point need to get engaged with DAOs one way or another. So do it early so that you have the knowledge and you are a pro. And make it your New Year's resolution. It's Persian New Year. So Persian New Year resolution to make sure to engage with one DAO and be persistent. Don't say, find a DAO that you want to work with, that you like, that aligns with your goals, and just try it out. Don't feel like if you don't get a response, it's because of you or it's because of them. It's usually because people are busy. Just hammer it and find something that you're excited about.
Very strong closing statements. Thank you so much. And Trent already posted in the chat the DAOs list. Thank you so much for that. Thank you for your time, Marta from ConsenSys, Trent from Ocean Protocol. Thank you so much. We have to close now. Sorry for the technical issue once again.
One more thing, maybe before we can close, just for everyone to know, or since it's a DAO series, we will have another episode next week, and we will you will see more on the tool side, like this tool support that you can use from Aragon over Colony over all the others. Right? We're going to discuss more on that end to get more practical, since we now got a level of understanding, I guess. And yes, other than that,
more information will come up on our websites, of course. And next Thursday, we'll see you guys for the episode 3 DAOs Black series.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thanks, Marta. Thanks, Trent.
Great
Thanks,
seeing
everyone.
you.